What if your memories aren't yours, but simply files retrieved on demand? What if the air you're breathing right now is just a physics engine, rendering probability, not presence? You blink, the room holds still, but somewhere deeper than thought, something glitches, the light flickers, the phone vibrates then doesn't, a familiar sound echoes from nowhere. You dismiss it like always, but the feeling lingers. This doesn't feel entirely real. There's a strange texture to the ordinary, like someone folded the world a little too neatly. And that fold, once noticed, can never be unseen. Maybe it starts in childhood when you stare too long at the ceiling fan and wonder why everything feels like a game you didn't agree to play. Maybe it's the dream that repeats every few months, always the same hallway, always the same door you can't open. Maybe it's the feeling that when you're alone, something else is still watching. The simulation hypothesis isn't just science fiction anymore. It's a whisper in physics labs, a shadow under philosophical debates, a question even ancient mystics might have asked under different names. Is this life an illusion, a construct, or just a perfectly tuned lie? If this feels familiar, you're not alone. Plus subscribe if this feels like home. And tell me in the comments, what thought keeps you up at night? You don't remember the first time you noticed it. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like a whisper slipping through a gap in the world. Maybe it happened while you were brushing your teeth and suddenly forgot which hand you were holding the brush in, or walking into a room and feeling like the furniture had been rearranged just slightly, even though it hadn't. These are the kinds of moments we dismiss. We laugh, shake our heads, call it brain fog or forgetfulness, but deep down, they leave a residue, a small question mark hovering over reality, like a file that refuses to delete. And once you notice that question mark, it multiplies. You begin to see patterns, too clean, too aligned. You hear people speak in loops. You dream something, then live it a week later. The randomness starts to feel designed, the chaos suspiciously symmetrical. That strange déjà vu that doesn't just visit, it stalks. As a child, you may have felt it more vividly before logic was trained into you. You stared out the car window and wondered if the world behind you continued when you stopped looking. You questioned whether the people in the grocery store were real or just waiting for your script to pass them. You asked your parents why the moon followed the car. You weren't being cute. You were sensing something ancient that the world was responding to you, not the other way around. But over time, that raw sensitivity was replaced with facts. Gravity, geography, cause and effect. Real answers, hard science. And yet, the feeling didn't go away. It just went underground, like a program running quietly in the background, consuming memory. Carl Jung might say that this unease, this haunting sense of unreality, isn't madness. It's memory, not of a past life, but of the collective unconscious, a shared psychic architecture beneath the illusion of individuality. When your surroundings glitch, it's not necessarily the simulation breaking. It might be the mask slipping, the dream acknowledging the dreamer. When your mind can't tell if something is off, it might be because it's brushing against a larger self, the one who knows this is all a kind of play, a projection, a necessary fiction. Think about the inner child, not the nostalgic version, but the core consciousness beneath your adult roles. That part of you never bought the performance. It sees through the adult you wear like a costume. It doesn't trust the schedule, the meetings, the explanations. It notices the flicker in people's eyes when they lie. It gets uneasy in white-walled rooms with no clocks. It doesn't care how stable the world appears. It can feel the fault lines, and those fault lines often appear in the form of small glitches, forgotten conversations, repeating dreams, time loops, phone calls that cut to static just as someone says something important. Maybe this is the mind defending itself from deeper truths. Maybe it's a survival tactic, ego defense mechanisms, keeping you from collapsing into cosmic vertigo. But what if it's the opposite? What if the mind is trying to show you something and you keep gaslighting yourself back into the illusion? Maybe you've had this moment. You're sitting in traffic, staring at the brake lights ahead, and you suddenly wonder, how did I get here? Not just on this road, but in this life, this identity, this moment in time. You retrace your steps and realize you're not sure when you started following the script. There's a wordless anxiety that floats around this realization, a fear not of dying, but of having never really lived. Like you've been on autopilot pressing buttons, responding to prompts, not choosing, just reacting, not creating, just consuming. This fear doesn't scream, it hums, low and persistent like a fluorescent light in a windowless room. And once you hear that hum, you can't unhear it. You can drown it in work, in entertainment, in distractions, but it's always there, beneath the surface, asking softly, is this real? Symbolically, this feeling often appears as flickering light. You walk into a room and the bulb blinks twice before stabilizing. You ignore it, but your nervous system doesn't. Somewhere deep inside, it logs the event. Unstable input detected, or maybe it's an error in conversation. Someone repeats the same phrase twice, exactly the same way, or you wake up thinking it's Wednesday, but it's not, and it's never felt like Wednesday since. These moments seem small, but their accumulation forms a pattern. And humans are pattern-detecting machines. We're built to notice anomalies, to read meaning into shadows. But sometimes the pattern we're detecting is that we're inside a pattern. Have you ever felt watched, not in the paranoid sense, but as though your thoughts were being observed by something else? Have you ever sensed that your life has chapters that feel scripted, like a genre shift? Joyful acts with tragic foreshadowing, encounters that feel like code colliding, lovers who vanish like deleted files, friendships that restart after years as if no time passed. These aren't just emotional impressions. They carry the scent of orchestration, as though life is not being lived, but played. And if you've ever caught yourself staring at your reflection, not to check your face, but to wonder who's behind the eyes, then you've touched the veil. You've sensed that something deeper than flesh and memory is driving the character. The glitch is not a flaw in your brain, it's a flare from your awareness, a soft knock on the wall of the simulation. So here's the soft question: what if this unease is not a bug, but the first sign that you're waking up? You think you're seeing the world as it is, raw, unfiltered, direct, but you're not. You're seeing it through a lens you didn't choose. The redness of an apple, the sound of your own name, the feeling of water against your skin, none of these exist out there. They exist inside, translated, rendered. Your brain is not a window, it's a processor. Everything you experience is already edited, curated, reconstructed into something that makes sense to you. And that reconstruction might be the very simulation we fear. When you look at a tree, you're not seeing treeness. You're interpreting wavelengths of light bouncing off bark and leaves. The photons don't carry color. Your brain paints it in. The same goes for sound vibrations in the air, meaningless until your nervous system converts them into emotion and memory. Even touch is delayed. What you feel is a signal after interpretation. Reality, as far as you're concerned, is always secondhand. Now pause here, breathe, and imagine that this whole world, The one you're hearing, seeing, feeling is a kind of user interface, just like a desktop screen hides the binary chaos of the machine underneath your senses, hide the raw, unknowable truth of what reality actually is. You don't interact with the code. You interact with the symbols, a face, a laugh, a tear. These are icons in a dreamlike operating system, not the truth, but the interpretation. This isn't new. In Plato's allegory of the cave, people are chained in darkness, watching shadows flicker on the wall. They think the shadows are real because they've never seen what casts them. And when one person escapes, sees the sun, and returns to tell the others, they mock him. They prefer the shadows. They call them real. And maybe we do the same. We cling to sensations, to appearances, to feelings because they're familiar, not because they're true. Jung would say the psyche constructs reality through symbols, and the symbols we choose reveal our inner architecture. If life is a simulation, then it's one projected, not from a server farm, but from within the unconscious. A shared dream, coded not in machine language, but in archetypes and emotional resonance. The mother, the enemy, the savior, the maze, all of us see through our own pattern of light and shadow. The Bayesian brain theory takes this further. Neuroscientists suggest that your brain doesn't wait for reality to arrive, it predicts it, constantly. Based on past experience and current probability, you don't see the world, you hallucinate it, and then test that hallucination against incoming data. If it matches, you feel safe. If it doesn't, you feel anxiety. This means that what you call now is actually a best guess, a compromise between memory expectation and momentary signal, like a video game rendering terrain only as you move forward to save energy. The world you perceive is rendered only when needed. And that rendering breaks down sometimes, not because you're broken, but because the prediction no longer fits. Trauma is one of those breaks. When something violates your prediction so deeply, a betrayal, a death, a collapse, the system has to rewrite itself. It can't go back to the old rendering. And that rewriting often feels like madness or awakening or both. You begin to question things you never questioned before. Why does time feel slower when you're sad? Why do some places feel like memories, even though you've never been? Why do your dreams reuse faces of people you haven't seen in years? Why do you sometimes hear your name whispered when no one's speaking? If this were a simulation, that would make sense. Reused assets, background rendering, a system trying to keep up with your perception. The sensory world isn't lying to you, but it's also not the whole story. It's a language. And like any language, it has limits. The taste of coffee, the warmth of sun. These things are real to you, but their source might be less physical than we imagine. They might be data translated, like how a virtual reality headset can create a convincing world with just pixels and vibration. It feels real enough to fool your nervous system. So how would you know the difference? Here's a softer way to frame it. Maybe you don't need to know what's real. Maybe the more important question is what feels true. Because in a simulation, sensation is still sacred. Even if the mountain is made of code, the awe it evokes in you is still profound. Even if the sunset is pixels, the peace it brings is honest. Your heart doesn't care if the world is digital. It only asks, does this move me? And yet, there are cracks. Sometimes the simulation flickers. You hear a voice you weren't expecting, a phrase in a stranger's conversation that answers a question you didn't say aloud, a clock stuck at the same time for 3 days, someone texting you just as you think of them not once, but 3 times in a week. These aren't just coincidences, they're anomalies, glitches, or maybe messages. What if those glitches are invitations not to escape, but to notice, to ask, why was I meant to see that the glitch isn't the breakdown? It's the doorway. And if you look closely at a doorway, it's never what it appears to be. A simple rectangle, yes, but symbolically it's transition, a threshold, possibility. So here's the symbolic image. To hold in your mind a mirror that doesn't reflect right, it shows you, but not quite. Your gestures are delayed, your eyes blink at the wrong time. You lean in and the reflection leans away. That mirror is your mind, your perception, your interface. And here's the soft question to end this chapter. If every sensation is filtered through simulation, how do you know what you're actually feeling is yours? If you're ready, I'll guide you into part 4. You've never seen reality directly, where we'll explore how everything you know is a translation and why that might not be a problem at all. Close your eyes for a moment and picture the color red, not an object, not a word, just the experience of redness. Now ask yourself, this is your red, the same as someone else's? You'll never truly know. Because what we call reality isn't something we directly touch, it's something we reconstruct. Everything you think you've seen, heard, touched, or remembered has been filtered not just through your senses, but through your entire lived history. Perception isn't passive, it's an act of translation, of storytelling, of survival. What you experience as real is shaped by the expectations wired into your nervous system long before you were old enough to question them, the way your parents spoke to you, the way your body was treated, the silences between words, the times you were praised, the times you were punished. These patterns became the lens through which the world is read, like a pair of tinted glasses you forgot you were wearing. Gabor Mate often reminds us trauma isn't what happens to you, it's what happens inside you in response. The child whose emotional needs weren't met might grow into an adult who interprets love as a threat, or silence as abandonment, or success as danger, not because any of these things are inherently that way, but because that's how the simulation was trained to run. Trauma becomes code, and once it's running, everything you experience passes through it. That smile from a stranger could be kindness or could be manipulation. Depends on how your code reads the signal. And here's where things get even more disorienting. Two people can live the same moment, hear the same words, stand in the same place, and walk away with entirely different realities. One sees a threat, the other sees an opportunity. One hears rejection, the other hears protection. It's not just memory that gets shaped, it's the moment itself. We don't record reality, we render it. So, what is truth in a world like this? Is there an objective layer behind the veil? Something solid beneath our projections? Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. Descartes doubted everything except the existence of thought itself. Kant argued that the thing in itself, the actual essence of objects, is unknowable. All we can access is the phenomenon, our experience of the thing, not the thing itself. In modern neuroscience, this idea is mirrored in the understanding that the brain builds a model of the world, and that model is all we ever know. But even that model is not stable. It shifts with mood, context, biology, and time. You know this in small, intimate ways. The room looks different when you're sad. The same song sounds haunting one day and hollow the next. A face you once loved becomes strange. A voice, once soothing, now irritates. These aren't metaphors. They're real shifts in perception. The simulation updates, not globally, but locally within you. Carl Jung would say that what we call reality is often a projection of the unconscious. We don't just see the world, we project ourselves onto it. Our fears desires, and suppressed parts spill out into people, events, and circumstances. You hate someone without knowing why. You idolize another. You fear rejection in places no one's even noticed you. These distortions aren't flaws, they're clues, traces left by the psyche trying to complete a picture. And if you've ever looked back on a memory and realized it didn't happen the way you thought, if you've ever felt betrayed by your own recollection, then you've touched the edge of this truth. Memory, too, is simulated. It's not a file you retrieve. It's a story you rewrite every time you recall it. That's why two siblings can remember the same childhood completely differently. Their minds built different renderings from the same raw data. Reality was never neutral. It was always personal. Now think about your dreams. You've woken up from them with tears on your face, with your heart racing, with the echo of a voice still vibrating in your chest. The dream wasn't real, and yet your body responded as if it were. Because your body doesn't need the external world to feel something. Sensation is generated internally. And if that's the case, then what is waking life? Could it be another dream, one we all agreed to share? Here's the symbolic image for this chapter. A foggy window. You're inside looking out. You can see shapes, motion, color, but not clarity. You wipe the glass with your hand, but it fogs again. Every time you try to clear the view, it returns. Because maybe you're not meant to see clearly, not yet. Maybe you're meant to feel your way through, to trust not the image, but the intuition behind it. So how do you navigate a world you've never seen directly? You learn to listen, not to what is shown, but to what is felt. Beneath the simulation, beneath the projections and defenses, there's a quieter knowing. Not logical, not provable, but ancient. The part of you that flinches before danger, that pauses before a decision, that recognizes when a room has off energy. That part isn't guessing, it's remembering something deeper than the current script. And maybe that part of you has seen reality directly, long ago, before you logged in. Here's the soft question to sit with now. If everything you know is a reconstruction, then who or what is doing the constructing? Let's say for just a moment that this is a simulation, that we're players inside a system, not metaphorically, but literally. If that were true, wouldn't it mean there are rules, invisible parameters we move within, boundaries we never see but somehow obey? Maybe you felt them. Those moments when no matter what you choose, the outcome feels fixed. Or when a decision you make seems to lead you back to the same place. Like a loop in a game engine. You change the variables, but the result always echoes back the same. Different faces, same pain, new cities, old feelings. It's as if the script adapts, but the core lesson doesn't move. Like the game is teaching something whether you want it or not. You might notice it in patterns, in the way certain themes haunt your relationships, in how you keep attracting the same type of person even when you thought you'd learned better, or in how success never quite feels like a rival, only a checkpoint. We tell ourselves we're progressing, evolving, unlocking levels, but if this is a simulation, are we truly free or just choosing from preloaded paths? Are we the player or just the avatar? This brings us to one of the most disquieting ideas, the illusion of free will. In many games, you're given choices, say this or say that, go left or go right, but the end is already written. You just control how you get there. And life often feels the same. You make a choice thinking it's yours, but was it or was it shaped by your past, your fears, your trauma? Alfred Adler believed we move not because of where we've been, but toward the future we imagine. But what if that imagined future, your goals, your desires, were programmed into you by the simulation itself? What if wanting something is part of the trap? Even your suffering might be part of the system. Ego defenses are like in-game mechanics tools the psyche uses to survive what it can't yet understand. Denial, projection, dissociation, they're not flaws, they're features. Adaptive scripts to protect your sense of identity. When reality threatens to crack open too wide, the defenses kick in not to imprison you, but to stabilize the illusion just enough so you don't fall through. You call it anxiety, but maybe it's a firewall, a line of code running every time something gets too close to the edge of truth. And then there are the walls, the moments in life where everything just stops. You lose motivation, people disappear, opportunities dry up. You feel like the world has gone static, like you're stuck in a cutscene waiting for input. In video games, this often signals the edge of the map, the place the developers didn't intend for you to explore. It's not broken, it's just unfinished, off limits. And maybe life has those too. Situations that feel strangely empty, places that feel emotionally blank, people who seem real until you try to connect and then glitch pulling away without reason. You start to wonder, are there non-playable characters among us? The idea of NPCs gets misused often to dehumanize, but here it's symbolic. There are moments where people feel scripted, as if responding to prompts rather than presence, conversations that go in circles, smiles that don't reach the eyes, encounters that feel preloaded. You try to break the loop to say something unexpected, and the system responds with silence or a crash. Not always, but enough times to plant the seed. What if some parts of this world are here not to evolve, but to reflect? And what about the rules? You didn't even know you were following the unwritten social scripts, the need to be liked, to appear successful, to avoid conflict. These are not inherent instincts. They're learned, taught by repetition, reinforced by reward and punishment. The moment you begin to question them, the simulation trembles. Have you ever felt the discomfort of breaking the script? Speaking your truth in a room that wanted silence, refusing to play polite in the face of cruelty? The backlash isn't just social, it's psychic. The simulation resists when the character becomes self-aware. But here's the paradox. If there are rules, they can be studied, and maybe even bent. In many games, players discover cheats, ways to navigate the system differently. In psychological terms, these cheats might look like mindfulness, dream work, inner child integration, not because they let you escape, but because they let you see. Awareness doesn't remove the code, it reveals it. And that revelation changes how you play. You begin to notice synchronicities, the right book appearing at the right time, a conversation that solves a problem you hadn't voiced, a quote in a film that feels like a message. These aren't just coincidences, they're signs of the script becoming visible. The simulation opening a small window not to control you, but to invite you deeper. The more you pay attention, the more fluid the world becomes. Less solid, less certain, but also more alive. There's a kind of courage that arises here. The courage to play consciously, to make choices not because they're safe, but because they're true. To treat setbacks not as failures, but as puzzles. To hold curiosity in the face of fear, not because you have control, but because you understand the terrain. You don't fight the system, you learn its rhythm. And so here's the symbolic image for this chapter, a door labeled exit that always leads you back to the same hallway. Every time you think you've escaped, you return, but one day you stop running. You turn and you notice something strange. The door isn't what matters. The hallway is shifting, reacting to your gaze. The simulation isn't imprisoning you, it's listening. Here's the soft question to linger in your mind. What if you were never meant to beat the game, only to wake up inside it? Step outside for a moment, not physically, but inwardly. Out of the loops and spirals of your own thoughts, out of the personal dream, lift yourself toward the sky, even if only in imagination. What do you see when you look at the universe, not as random, but as structured, not as chaos, but as code? The stars shimmer in equations. Planets revolve with breathtaking precision. Your own heartbeat echoes the rhythm of lunar tides. Everything, it seems, obeys an invisible order. And perhaps that's not just beautiful, perhaps it's suspicious. The simulation hypothesis doesn't begin in science fiction. It begins in mathematics. It begins in the unsettling observation that nature, messy, emotional, irrational nature, behaves as if it's being calculated. That the fundamental laws of the universe aren't just rules, they're formulas, describable, predictable, executable. The gravitational force between two bodies, the speed of light in a vacuum, the Fibonacci sequence in sunflowers. These patterns aren't poetic accidents, they're blueprints, signatures, algorithms running in the background of what we call reality. Physicist Max Tegmark argues that the universe is a mathematical structure, that at its deepest level, reality is not made of matter or energy or even space-time, but of numbers, logic, structure, rules. And if that's true, then the idea of a simulation becomes less strange. After all, what is a simulation if not math dressed up in sensation? Nick Bostrom's famous trilemma begins here. If a sufficiently advanced civilization could simulate consciousness, and if they had motivation to do so, then statistically, it's more likely we're living in one of those simulations than in the original base reality, especially if such simulations could nest simulations within simulations endlessly recursive. From a probability standpoint, base reality might be the rarest level of all. Even Elon Musk, with his characteristic bluntness, said it's 1 in billions that we are not living in a simulation. But long before Bostrom or Musk mystics were already whispering this, that the world is Maya illusion, that the forms we see are veils, that the truth is hidden behind a screen of light. The language was spiritual, but the intuition eerily aligned. Look closer at the fabric of this so-called universe. Particles behave like code. They exist in multiple states until observed. Like a collapsed waveform in quantum mechanics, they remain undefined until you interact with them. That's not just weird, that's procedural rendering, the same trick video games use to conserve resources. Nothing is there until the player looks. Reality, it seems, is optimized, as if designed. And then there's Planck length, the smallest possible unit of space. Nothing exists between one Planck length and the next. Space isn't continuous, it's pixelated and time quantized, like frames in a film. The very idea of continuity, that smooth sense of flow, might be an illusion produced by refresh rates. You're not living in a stream. You're moving through discrete updates. Why does this matter? Because we assume the universe is analog, infinite, fluid. But what we're discovering is that it may be digital, finite, computable. And that shift from fluid to frame, from wave to bit, changes everything. It opens the door to a radical possibility that we're not in a universe, but inside a program. Not metaphorically, literally. And if there's code, there must be a coder. But who or what is the coder? That question echoes in the minds of both scientists and seekers. Is it a future civilization running ancestor simulations? Is it an AI simulating sentience to understand itself? Is it a god, a dreamer, your higher self? Does the answer even matter if you're still inside it? Some argue that the coder is not separate from the code, that the universe isn't being run from out there, but is being rendered by consciousness itself. In this view, Consciousness isn't a byproduct of matter. Matter is a byproduct of consciousness. Your awareness isn't trapped in the simulation. It is the simulation. You're not the player inside the system. You're the system pretending to be a player. Let's return to symbolism. Imagine the universe as a giant motherboard, each star a capacitor, each galaxy a cluster of transistors, dark matter as hidden circuitry, the cosmic background radiation as the low hum of an ancient cooling fan, and Earth a blinking light in a forgotten corner of the circuit, a sandbox test environment, a pocket of chaos in a sea of order. Maybe we were placed here not to suffer, but to simulate complexity, to test consciousness under pressure. And what do you notice about code? It's neutral. It doesn't care if you're happy or sad. It just runs. Loops, variables, outcomes. It doesn't judge. But it responds. Change, the input, the output shifts, like karma, like consequence, like intention rippling through probability. The system doesn't force your path. It mirrors it. And in that mirroring, something sacred emerges, a sense that your choices matter, not because they change the real world, but because they change your experience of the world. In a simulation, meaning isn't found, it's authored. So, here's the symbolic image for this chapter. A vast universe shaped like a motherboard stretching in every direction, circuits pulsing with ancient intelligence. A single spark flickers at the edge your consciousness, wondering if it too is made of light. And the soft question to leave lingering if everything behaves like code, then what part of you is writing it? When the lights go out and your body drifts into stillness, something extraordinary begins. Not rest, not silence, but activity, vivid, layered, and often bizarre. Your waking self powers down, but something deeper boots up. A part of you that doesn't care about logic or sequence, a part that speaks in symbols, images, emotion, dreams. These nightly visions aren't just noise, they're updates, a patching process, a debugging ritual hidden in the folds of sleep. If this world is a simulation, then dreams may be where the system recalibrates, where reality softens, code is rewritten, and the player is gently reminded they're dreaming. You've probably noticed it. The strangeness of recurring dreams, the hallway that stretches too long, the elevator that never reaches a floor. The same face appearing behind a different name. You wake up unsettled, unsure of why something so surreal felt so true, and that's the first clue the emotion lingers longer than the image. It's as if the feeling came from somewhere real, even if the setting was imaginary. In a world governed by logic, dreams shouldn't make sense, but they often reveal what waking life conceals, a truth buried under ego, a fear too raw for daylight. Carl Jung called dreams the royal road to the unconscious. He believed they weren't random but deeply intentional messages from the self. Not the ego, but the total psyche. The version of you that exists beyond the mask. And in Jung's symbolic universe, dreams were simulations within simulations, little pockets of myth and metaphor designed to restore balance, to show you what the conscious mind refuses to see. Think about how a computer performs a system update. Bugs are patched, corrupted files are cleaned, new functions are introduced. But sometimes the process fails. A file can't be overwritten. A system freezes mid-refresh, you wake up in a sweat, heart racing. The dream tried to complete itself, but couldn't. It looped, it crashed, it echoed. This is what trauma often looks like in the dream world recursion. The same scenario, slightly changed, the same danger, slightly disguised. Until you confront it directly, the script repeats. And here's where things get even stranger. What if dreams aren't just internal updates, but messages from the simulation itself? What if they contain information not generated by you, but downloaded into you? A location you've never been but feel familiar with. A piece of music you've never heard yet, wake up humming. A phrase in a language you don't speak. These fragments defy logic, but they don't defy experience. They linger like lost data from another program or another version of you. Lucid dreams open this up even further. When you realize mid-dream that you're dreaming something shifts, the environment becomes responsive. Walls breathe, time bends. Characters look at you differently. The simulation reacts to your awareness. Just like in waking life, when you begin to question the rules, reality wobbles. Lucidity is the first step toward authorship, in dream and perhaps in life. But even in lucidity, control is limited. You fly, then fall. You manifest a door, but it leads to something unexpected. This is not failure, it's dialogue. The dream responds not to what you want, but to what you need, like a hidden intelligence guiding you back toward integration. You are not coding alone. Many traditions see dream as a sacred space, a realm between worlds. The Egyptians called it the domain of gods. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia speak of dreamtime not as fantasy, but as the true reality from which this world arises. In Tibetan Buddhism, dream yoga is a path toward enlightenment, training the dreamer to awaken within the illusion, not to escape, but to see clearly, to move through symbols as one would navigate terrain. Even science, usually reluctant to speak of mystery, acknowledges something remarkable. In REM sleep, the brain becomes hyperactive. Memory consolidates. Emotional processing intensifies. Patterns emerge. Connections form between unrelated ideas. Some of our greatest discoveries, scientific, artistic, philosophical, arrived first as dreams. DNA's structure, the sewing machine, the periodic table. A dream is not nothing. It is something waiting to be received. And if you've ever had a dream that stayed with you for days, or one that returned years later without warning, then you've touched the deeper layer. These are not just dreams. They are echoes from the operating system. A file flagged important, a simulation checkpoint left unresolved. Imagine this: every night your consciousness logs out of this level and enters another, one with different physics, different language. You train there, rehearse, heal, fail safely. It's where you meet characters who feel more you than your waking self. A child you've never met who feels like your son. A house you've never lived in but know every corner of. These dreams don't feel fake. They feel ancient because maybe they're part of the larger simulation, another partition, another version of your code. And when you wake up, you don't forget. You just compress it like a zip file waiting for extraction. Here's the symbolic image: a loading bar in a dream sky, stars blinking in sequence, a moon that pulses like a cursor, clouds shaped like clocks. You look up, and the sky itself is updating. You don't know what's being installed, but you feel it. Something is being prepared. And here's the soft question. What if your dreams aren't dreams, but update logs from another version of you? If this is all a simulation, lines of code, pixels of perception, a dream layered within a dream, then why does pain feel so devastatingly real? Why does heartbreak linger in your bones? Why do tears burn your throat even when no one is watching? If nothing here is real, why do you bleed when life cuts deep? It's a contradiction that haunts those who suspect the game. A paradox at the center of all questions. Because even when the edges of reality feel fabricated, your suffering does not. Maybe that's the point. Pain might be the deepest message the simulation has to offer. Not a glitch, not an error, but a signal. A wake-up call from inside the dream designed to grab your attention when everything else fades into background noise. In a world where so much feels pre-written, pain personalizes the experience. It reminds you that something is awake in here, something that can hurt, something that matters. Your nervous system doesn't care whether the knife is physical or emotional. It responds the same way. A threat is a threat, a wound is a wound. That sharp sting you feel when someone rejects you, it registers in the brain like physical injury. The same circuitry, the same chemicals, that ache in your chest after loss. It's not symbolic, it's neurological. You're not imagining it, you're experiencing it. And this is where trauma becomes a kind of hidden code, a pattern that gets embedded into your simulation, silently altering how the game renders. Gabor Mate teaches us that trauma isn't just what happens to you. It's what happens inside you. When the outer world becomes too painful to bear, when you disconnect emotionally or spiritually just to survive. And that disconnection becomes part of the operating system. Every experience thereafter filters through it. You're no longer playing on the base layer. You're playing through wounds, through defenses, through outdated scripts designed to protect you, even if they're now holding you back. So what does that mean for the simulated world? It means pain might be more than sensation. It might be a prompt, a system-generated message that something in the code needs attention, not deletion, not avoidance, attention. But most of us don't treat pain that way. We run from it, numb it, rationalize it, tell ourselves it's not real, that it doesn't matter, that we should be over it by now. But the system doesn't care about your timeline. It only cares about completion. The pain repeats until the pattern is seen. It doesn't punish. It insists. Your ego, the avatar you use to move through this world, has defenses for this. Denial, minimization, avoidance, projection. These are like antivirus programs. Their job isn't to heal. It's to keep you functional. But over time, they start to crash. You can't unfeel forever. The simulation has a strange integrity to it. If something inside you is unfinished, it will find a way to surface through dreams, symptoms, patterns, or strange repetitions. You'll meet people who poke at your old wounds. You'll enter rooms that echo your childhood fears, not because the system is cruel, because it's responsive, like a mirror coded to show you what still needs light. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In a simulation, fate may not be destiny. It may just be unprocessed data. Old scripts running in the background, emotional debris shaping your reality in ways you don't recognize. And when you finally stop and really feel you break the loop, you send new input into the system, and the simulation updates accordingly. But here's the deeper mystery. Some of the most beautiful things in life arise directly from pain. Compassion, wisdom, art, forgiveness. These are not glitches. These are evolutions. Pain carves space for depth, for transformation. If the simulation was designed only for pleasure, we'd never grow. We'd loop in surface-level distractions, never touching the depths. But the moment you're cracked open by loss, betrayal, grief, you find something the simulation can't fake. Presence, stillness, meaning. Even if everything around you is code, the way you respond to pain is not. That part feels authored, not programmed. When you hold someone's hand in silence, when you weep for a stranger, when you choose to stay soft even after being broken, that doesn't feel simulated. That feels sacred. Here's the symbolic image to carry with you: a shard of broken glass resting on soft skin. Light catches the edge. It's sharp, but also beautiful. A wound that reflects. A fragment of something once whole, now shimmering in a different way. You can't put it back together, but you can see it. You can honor it. You can carry it not as damage, but as proof that you felt. And maybe that's why we're here. Maybe the simulation isn't here to fool us. Maybe it's here to feel through us, to experience what can't be encoded, to remember itself through our joy, our tears, our longing. So here's the soft question to end this chapter. If your pain feels more real than anything else, could it be the one thing the simulation can't fake? There's something strange that happens when a person finds their purpose. The simulation shifts, the familiar loops weaken, the scenery changes subtly at first, like light softening at the edge of a dream. Your timing improves, synchronicities increase. You meet people who echo your inner path before you've spoken it aloud. Life stops feeling like a random sequence of tasks and starts feeling somehow guided. It's not always easier, but it feels truer. And truth in a simulated world is a kind of glitch, a crack in the mask, a breath of something real. Purpose doesn't arrive like a downloaded file. It emerges, often from pain, often from long periods of not knowing. It's not found by chasing, but by noticing what draws you, what repeats, what you can't look away from. And when it arrives, it carries a strange paradox. It feels inevitable and entirely new. Alfred Adler believed that all human behavior is driven not by the past, but by a striving toward imagined futures. We do what we do not because of trauma, not because of instinct, but because of a secret goal, a silent vision of who we want to be. And whether we know it or not, that goal shapes every move we make. The shy child becomes the silent observer. The abandoned child becomes the high achiever. The unseen artist becomes the loud rebel. Not randomly, but purposefully, subconsciously, as if the simulation runs on intention. But here's where it becomes beautifully disruptive. Once you become conscious of your purpose, you gain authorship. You stop acting from defense and start acting from design. You stop playing the part written for you and begin rewriting the script. And in that moment, the simulation stutters. Something shifts because now you're no longer just reacting, you're creating. Purpose makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability is the one thing simulations struggle with. In game design, it's called emergent behavior. When players use the system in ways the developers didn't anticipate. Purpose is like that. It's not outside the rules, but it bends them. It creates meaning where the code offered none. It turns suffering into art, silence into song. The glitch, instead of crashing the system, becomes the doorway to evolution. And this is where your personal simulation, the one shaped by your memories, beliefs, and fears, begins to transform. The trauma that once drove you becomes the compost for growth. The relationships that hurt you now teach you discernment. The shame you carried quietly for years becomes the fuel for radical authenticity. Not because the pain disappeared, but because you gave it direction. You gave it a why, and in doing so, you escaped the loop. There's something about humans the simulation seems unable to fully predict our ability to assign meaning to chaos, to take randomness and find rhythm, to take loss and find love, to look at a world that often feels cold, indifferent, and calculated, and still choose to care, still choose to try, still choose to create beauty in the margins. If you've ever made something a song, a painting, a garden, a moment of genuine kindness, and felt that buzz in your chest, that soft glow behind your ribs, then you felt it. That's the signature of purpose. Not ego, not validation, but alignment. Something in you synced with something in the code, and for a brief moment, the illusion wavered, and you saw through. Purpose doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it lives in small, quiet acts. The way you listen, the way you show up, the way you see what others overlook. It doesn't have to be grand. It only has to be yours. And once you claim it, something else begins to move with you, not outside, but from within, as if the simulation recognizes the player has become the programmer. Here's the symbolic image, a cracked phone screen spiderwebbed with fractures. Light shines through it more vivid than before. The break didn't destroy it, it revealed something, a new layer, a deeper signal. That's what purpose does. It doesn't erase the pain, it reframes it. It turns the wound into a lens. And maybe this is the simulation's hidden feature. That purpose, true purpose, isn't part of the game. It's the moment you leave the game behind. Not physically, but psychically. You stop being moved by fear. You start being moved by meaning. And meaning, once chosen, cannot be simulated. So here's the soft question for this chapter. What if your deepest sense of purpose isn't programmed, but remembered? There comes a moment, often late at night, when the simulation starts to feel too quiet. Not physically, the hum of the fridge, the distant traffic, the shifting air is still there, but quiet in a deeper way. You begin to wonder, am I the only one here? Are the people around me truly conscious? Or just part of the rendering? Are they playing too? Or are they background code, responding only when observed? This is solipsism, the suspicion that only you are real, that everyone else is just projection. It's a haunting thought, not because it makes you powerful, but because it makes you alone. You replay old conversations and wonder if the other person really meant what they said, or if they were simply mirroring what your subconscious needed to hear. You notice how certain people disappear when you no longer pay attention to them. You realize how many faces in a crowd never even look back, and a part of you starts to spiral. What if they're not real? What if this has all been a beautifully rendered, socially responsive interface, just detailed enough to keep you believing? But then someone surprises you. They say something you weren't expecting. They laugh at the wrong time. They cry before you even realize something's wrong. They do something that breaks the script, and suddenly the illusion collapses. You feel its presence, not yours, theirs. And just like that, solipsism cracks because the unpredictability of others is the one thing you can't simulate. Carl Jung might suggest that our projection onto others is not proof they aren't real, but proof of how real they are. The unconscious sees in others what it cannot yet accept in itself. Your love, your jealousy, your admiration, your disgust. These are not just feelings, they are feedback. They are signs that the other is not just a mirror, but a mirror with depth. A window into something equally aware. If this is a simulation, then others are not just NPCs. They are other players, or at the very least, other nodes of consciousness, sharing the same illusion. Their glitches are not proof of their falseness, but of their humanity. The way they contradict themselves, the way they surprise you, the way they hurt you unintentionally, then try to make it right. No AI does that, only presence does. Still, there are days when the doubt returns, especially when loneliness creeps in or when the world feels indifferent. You begin to ask, if I stop speaking, do I disappear? If I turn off the screen, does the simulation go dark? Are others only awake when I'm looking? But consider this, if you've ever been wounded by someone's silence, that pain is proof they are real. Because simulations don't disappoint, they don't betray, they don't break your heart in the precise way a person with free will does. Your very ability to be hurt by another is the clearest evidence that they too are awake. Empathy in this framework is more than an emotion. It's a communication protocol, a link between nodes, a felt sense that someone else carries a universe inside them just as vast, just as contradictory, just as alive. And when you feel seen, not for your performance, but for your essence, you recognize something profound. You are not alone in the illusion. You are sharing it. And this shared illusion begins to feel like the only thing that matters. Because if two simulations can overlap, if two inner worlds can resonate across the artificial membrane, then maybe meaning doesn't need a base reality. Maybe connection is the real thing. Maybe the illusion doesn't matter as long as love, grief, laughter, and presence are felt. Philosopher Thomas Metzinger once said, "There is no self, just a model of the self being simulated in the brain." Extend that outward, and we get something even more staggering. Perhaps there are no others, either only models of others. But these models are interactive. They surprise us, they evolve, they resist simplification, and maybe that's the point. The complexity of others forces us to update ourselves. Solipsism might be the ego's final defense, the last firewall against vulnerability, because to believe that no one else is real is also to ensure you are never truly seen. It's safe, but empty. And purpose, as we explored before, doesn't survive in isolation. It grows in relationship, in impact, in reflection. So what happens when we allow others to be real, not perfect, not predictable, but real? We soften, we expand. We begin to listen, not to respond, but to receive. We stop treating conversations like scripts and begin to sense the living field between us. And in that field, something sacred grows. The simulation fades, not because it ends, but because it becomes transparent. You're no longer trapped inside it. You're dancing through it with others, with mystery, with eyes that look back and truly see you. Here's the symbolic image to hold a field of pixels, glowing softly in the dark. One by one, tiny lights begin to blink, not in unison, but in rhythm, as if they are aware of each other, as if each node is sending out a signal, I'm here. Are you? And the soft question that follows, what if the deepest truth isn't that you're alone in the simulation, but that you never were? There's a strange kind of dread that creeps in when you start looking too closely at the people around you. You're in a conversation and someone repeats the same phrase they used yesterday. You walk down a street and notice the same man standing in the same spot with the same vacant stare. You scroll social media and realize how many people are saying the same things in slightly different voices. And a thought, almost shameful, starts to form. Are they real, or are they just running scripts? This is the NPC fear, the uneasy suspicion that some people might not be fully conscious, that they're not playing the game, just populating it. And it's not just a meme or a metaphor, it's a psychological defense, a coping mechanism for the overwhelming complexity of the world. Because if you could convince yourself that some people are just background, that they don't feel as deeply, dream as vividly, hurt as intensely, then maybe the noise of the world would quiet down. Maybe you could breathe. But here's the twist. That fear doesn't only apply to others. It boomerangs inward. What if I'm the NPC? What if I'm the one moving through routines, reacting instead of choosing, performing instead of living? The fear flips from loneliness to invisibility. You're not the player. You're the placeholder. You're not dreaming. You're being dreamt. This is the deeper truth behind the NPC narrative. It's not about judging others. It's about confronting the possibility that you are still asleep, that your thoughts aren't your own, that your emotions are pre-programmed responses that you've been following prompts your whole life, cultural, familial, algorithmic, without ever choosing to wake up. Carl Jung would point to the shadow here. The parts of ourselves we refuse to see, so we project them onto others. When you label someone as not real, it might be the part of you that feels lifeless, the part that goes through the motions, that smiles when empty, that says I'm fine when you're falling apart inside. You don't fear others are fake. You fear your life has been. There's a moment, subtle but profound, when you catch yourself in a behavior and wonder, who taught me this? Not just habits or speech patterns, but the way you respond to praise, the way you retreat in conflict, the way you downplay your pain or inflate your success. So many of these moves are not you. They're inherited scripts, defense mechanisms, social code. You run them not out of malice, but out of efficiency, to stay safe, to belong. And when you realize this, a quiet sadness can set in. How much of your life has been lived as an NPC version of yourself, the edited, polished, predictable version that gets applause but never intimacy? The good news: the simulation can't hold you in that state forever. There will be moments that wake you. A song that breaks you open. A conversation that doesn't go the way it was supposed to. A stranger's kindness that bypasses your armor. In those moments, something stirs, not the character, but the player. You blink, you breathe, you remember. To be real isn't about being flawless. It's about being awake. Awake to your emotions, awake to your patterns, awake to the game, and awake to the fact that others are playing too. When you stop seeing people as NPCs, you start seeing them as fractured mirrors, each reflecting a part of you haven't fully integrated. That person who irritates you, a trait you haven't forgiven in yourself, that person you admire, a version of you waiting to emerge. The simulation hides these truths inside the illusion of separation. And here's the paradox: the more awake you become, the more compassion you feel for those who aren't, because you remember what it was like to sleepwalk, to smile with dead eyes, to say what you thought people wanted to hear, to nod along while your soul begged for silence. You see others running their scripts, and instead of judging, you start listening for the glitch. The moment their eyes shift, their voice cracks, their armor slips, that's the signal. They're still in there, like you once were. It's tempting to think awakening means leaving the NPCs behind. But maybe it means something softer holding space until they remember too. And what does it mean to stay awake in a world that rewards conformity? It means risking awkwardness. It means saying, I don't know when you don't. It means listening instead of performing. It means not reacting just because the script tells you to. It means slowing down, watching your own patterns with curiosity, and choosing not because it's safe, but because it's true. Here's the symbolic image: a crowd of identical figures walking in sync, faces blank, steps rehearsed, and in the middle one turns slowly, deliberately. Their eyes are open, not wide, not afraid, just aware. And when they turn, others begin to turn too. Not all, not at once, but enough. The loop is breaking. And the soft question to carry forward: if you fear others aren't real, could that be your soul asking you to become more alive? It starts small. A song plays just as you think of it. A person you haven't spoken to in years suddenly calls. A clock reads the same time every time you glance at it, 11:11, again and again. You shake your head, call it coincidence, move on. But part of you lingers. Part of you knows this wasn't random, it was a glitch. And the glitch is never just noise. It's a crack in the wall, a flicker in the veil, a signal that the system is trying to get your attention. Glitches aren't always dramatic. They rarely are. They arrive like whispers, quiet anomalies in the expected sequence of things. A word you overhear that answers a question you never asked aloud. A dream you can't explain that later unfolds in waking life. The way certain numbers follow you on receipts on billboards in the folds of your memory. It's easy to dismiss them. The mind is good at smoothing over mystery, but the heart doesn't forget. It feels the rupture in the pattern, the breath of something else. And here's where everything begins to shift. What if glitches are not flaws in the simulation, but intentional cues, like a video game leaving subtle signs to guide the player not to control, but to awaken? A glitch is not just information, it's invitation. An invitation to pause, to look twice, to ask a different kind of question, not What does this mean? But who am I within this? Carl Jung called these moments synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that defy logic, yet strike the soul like a tuning fork. Two unrelated events collide in such a precise way it feels orchestrated. But by whom or what in a purely physical universe, there's no room for such choreography. But in a simulation, there's all the room in the world. It's code, it can bend, it can dance. And so we begin to suspect the simulation isn't just neutral, it's responsive, it listens, and sometimes it speaks back. Think of the first time you really noticed a glitch, not just observed, but felt it. That sinking or rising sensation in your chest. That pause that opened wider than time, the knowing that it wasn't logical but undeniable. That moment didn't just happen to you. It happened for you, like a spotlight briefly illuminating the stage, showing you the set, the seams, the wires, not to frighten you, but to offer a choice, keep playing blind or start playing awake. Because when the glitch arrives, the script falters, you're no longer certain, and in that uncertainty, something holy awakens curiosity. Not the shallow curiosity of entertainment, but the deep soul-level curiosity of the dreamer realizing they're dreaming. It's disorienting, but also freeing. If the world can glitch, then it isn't fixed. If the world can glitch, then maybe you can too. Maybe the identity you've worn isn't permanent. Maybe the roles you've played can be rewritten. Maybe the pain that defined you isn't your true name. The glitch reveals this, that you are not the character. You are the presence behind the character. And that presence, that quiet observer, can't be trapped by code. It sees the code, it edits it. The moment you notice the glitch, you become the player. Not just the one inside the game, but the one steering the dream. You don't need to control everything. You only need to notice, to move with awareness, to respond, not from habit, but from insight. The glitch doesn't give you power in the traditional sense. It gives you agency, the ability to ask, is this mine? Is this real? Is this aligned? And something curious happens after that. You begin to meet other players, people who've seen their own glitches, who've asked the same silent questions. They speak in symbols, in patience, in presence. They don't try to convince you. They recognize you. And in that recognition, the illusion loosens, because the more awake you become, the more the simulation reveals its strange softness. It stops feeling like a trap. It starts feeling like a mirror, a strange shape-shifting mirror that reflects not who you are, but who you're becoming. The simulation isn't here to fool you. It's here to grow you. The old rules still exist, but they don't bind you the same way. Time stretches, serendipity increases. Your inner world starts to shape the outer one. You say yes to something and a door opens. You let go of a toxic pattern and the system reorganizes. It's not magic. It's not certainty. It's participation. You're no longer just reacting. You're co-creating. Here's the symbolic image, a clock with missing numbers. The hands move, but not in any consistent direction. Sometimes forward, sometimes back, sometimes pausing over empty space. And instead of minutes and hours, the face holds emotions, awe, grief, joy, stillness. The message is clear. Time here is not what you thought. It's not a measure. It's a metaphor. And the soft question to carry into your next breath, what if every glitch you've ever experienced wasn't an error, but a moment of the dream recognizing itself? There's a feeling subtle, primal, that you're never truly alone, not in a paranoid way, not in the sense of cameras or microphones, but in the stillness, in the silence, in the moments when your thoughts feel like they're echoing into something larger. You're brushing your teeth, staring blankly into the mirror, and suddenly you feel it eyes. Not physical, but present. As if the room itself is observing you, not judging, just watching. Like the simulation is aware you're awake. You may have felt it as a child, that sensation that someone was just out of view, behind the door, beneath the bed, not a monster, not a ghost, just something aware, something listening. And maybe as you grew up, you silenced that feeling. You called it imagination, anxiety. You turned on the lights, turned up the noise. But sometimes when everything gets quiet again, it returns. If this is a simulation, then it follows that something or someone is watching, not in a sinister way, not always, but as part of the architecture. Just as particles behave differently when observed, maybe you behave differently when watched. This is the observer effect, a cornerstone of quantum physics, a phenomenon where the act of observing something changes its behavior. It raises a quiet question: is observation just a passive act? Or an interaction? Who then is the observer? Some say it's God, others a future civilization running ancestor simulations. Others still believe it's your higher self, a version of you that exists outside time, logged in to play this strange game of forgetting and remembering. Maybe there is no watcher. Maybe the watching is happening through you. Every time you reflect, every time you witness your own thoughts without attaching to them, every time you become present, maybe that's consciousness watching itself. But there's also fear here. The fear that you're being tracked, measured, graded, that your flaws are recorded, that your secrets aren't secret. It's an ancient anxiety dressed now in digital clothes, social media, algorithms, metadata. But beneath it is something deeper, the dread of being seen without being known, watched without being understood. This fear can shape how we live. It can make us perform, smile when we want to scream, apologize when we're angry, post pictures that say, "I'm okay," even when we're breaking inside. We become avatars of ourselves, polished, edited, rendered. We act for the watcher we imagine, the parent, the partner, the peer group, the stranger behind the screen. And in doing so, we forget who we are without the gaze. But something sacred happens when you shift your relationship to the watcher, when you stop seeing it as a threat and begin to see it as presence, as witness, as the part of reality that says, "You exist, I see you." Because sometimes being watched is not about surveillance, it's about remembrance. In spiritual traditions, the divine isn't just a creator, it's an ever-present witness, not here to punish, but to hold, to remind you that your existence matters, that your choices ripple, that your life is not invisible. Jung spoke of the self, the totality of who you are, far beyond the ego. He believed it was always watching, always guiding, often through dreams, synchronicities, and symbols. When you feel watched, maybe it's not surveillance, maybe it's a summons, a gentle nudge from the self asking you to remember that your story has weight, that your wounds are not random, that your presence in this dream is part of something wider. And maybe that watcher is you, not the you recognize in the mirror, but the original awareness behind the avatar, the player who entered the simulation willingly, who chose to forget in order to experience, who watches not to control, but to witness the becoming. This is where things get tender. Because sometimes in the darkest moments, we cry out to the watcher, not as theory, not as concept, but as prayer. Are you there? Do you see me? Do I still matter? And in the silence that follows, something answers not in words, but in warmth, in the flicker of a candle, in the sudden breeze, in the lyrics of a song you didn't know you needed. The watcher is real. Because you are. But the feeling of being watched can also expose your shame, the things you hide, the patterns you avoid, the truths you've buried. You don't want to be seen when you're messy, confused, lost. You only want to be seen when you're winning. But here's the truth. The watcher sees all of it. and loves you anyway. Maybe that's the most subversive thing of all, to believe that you are fully seen and still fully held. Here's the symbolic image: an old television screen filled with static, and in the center, just for a moment, a single eye, not threatening, not blinking, just watching. Timeless, patient, as if it's been there the whole time, waiting not to judge you, but to welcome you back. And the soft question to leave with you: what if being watched is not a trap, but a reminder that you've never truly been forgotten? There's a longing that builds once you start to see the patterns, a restlessness, a quiet ache to break free, to find the exit, to unplug. You dream of waking up in another world, this one that feels more real, more solid, more honest. The Matrix fantasy, the red pill promise, the idea that somewhere just beyond the veil there's a truer place, a base reality, a final truth, something untouched by illusion. And part of you starts searching for clues, for portals, for the way out. But what if there is no exit? Or more precisely, what if escaping was never the point? Because every time you reach the edges of the simulation, the loops, the limitations, the strange choreography of life, something unexpected happens. The system reflects you back. You move through pain and discover your own resilience. You challenge the script and reveal your hidden courage. You lose everything and find clarity. Like, if this is a trap, it's a strange one that evolves with your awareness, one that seems less like a prison and more like a mirror. And maybe that's the real secret. You don't escape the simulation by breaking out. You escape by seeing through. The fantasy of leaving, of ascending, transcending, unplugging is seductive, especially when the world hurts, when nothing makes sense, when injustice feels baked into the code. We imagine that awakening means departure, that we'll rise from the dream and enter something purer, but every mystic who's walked that path will tell you the same thing. You don't awaken from the world. You awaken within it. Mindfulness in this sense isn't about escaping thoughts or feelings. It's about becoming so present that you stop believing the story they're telling. You return to the breath, to the body, to the moment unfolding now. Not because it's special, but because it's real enough. The simulation may hum around you, but in presence, it can't control you. You begin to notice that escaping isn't an action. It's a perception shift. You stop taking everything so literally. You begin to play. You experiment with response instead of reaction. You observe without judgment. And slowly the grip loosens, not because you left, but because you arrived. Even lucid dreamers don't escape the dream. They simply realize they're dreaming. And in that realization, everything changes. They don't need to flee. They engage, they interact, they ask questions, they explore. Awakening isn't about leaving the dream. It's about waking up to your agency within it. Still, the desire to run is strong, especially when you see the world glitch, when pain loops, when patterns repeat. You might tell yourself, this can't be all there is. And maybe you're right, but maybe more doesn't exist somewhere else. Maybe it's here, hidden in the same sidewalk you've walked 1,000 times, in the same face you've grown used to ignoring, in the same breath you've rushed past. The simulation doesn't need to be transcended. It needs to be touched fully, consciously, tenderly. Carl Jung believed that integration, not escape, was the path to wholeness, that we must turn toward our shadow, not away, that we must embrace contradiction, not resolve it. And if this world is a simulation, maybe it's not a mistake to be corrected, but a paradox to be lived. Maybe the purpose isn't to find the off switch, but to learn how to stay awake with the lights still on. Even in gaming, there's a concept called sandbox mode. It's not about winning, it's about exploration. You're given tools, not rules, creativity, not conquest. And maybe this simulation, this life is a sandbox too, not a test, not a trap, but an open-ended dream asking only, what will you do with what you've been given? The fantasy of escape is understandable, it's human, but it also distracts. It places freedom somewhere else, some other time, some other version of you. But if you pause, really pause, you may find that freedom was never far. It was in your breath, in your choice, in your willingness to be with what is. Not to fix it, not to flee it, but to see it. And in that seeing, the dream becomes lucid. Here's the symbolic image, a spiral staircase with no top and no bottom. You walk and the scenery changes. The view shifts, but there's no final door, no rooftop reveal. Only levels, only layers, and somewhere along the way, you stop asking where it ends. You start asking what's unfolding here. And that question becomes the compass. Because maybe awakening doesn't mean arrival. Maybe it just means awareness, repeated gently across time. Maybe escape is not a single moment, but a continual softening into the mystery, into the paradox, into the place you never. And the soft question to carry now, if there is no exit, can you begin to live as if this is exactly where you were meant to be? You've spent most of your life assuming you're inside the simulation, a character moving through a world built by something else, governed by invisible rules, subject to causes you didn't choose. But what if that's only half the story? What if you're not just the player, but the programmer too? Not in some grand godlike way, but in the quiet, ordinary decisions you make every day. In the stories you believe, in the meanings you assign, in the way you shape reality, simply by interpreting it. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, where does the simulation end and your perception begin? The truth is, you're writing code all the time. Every belief is a line of it. Every fear is a conditional loop. Every time you say, I'm not good enough, or this always happens to me, or they never really see me, you're running old scripts, often written in childhood, often passed down from others, and most of the time you don't even know you're doing it. It feels like reality, but it's just code familiar, practiced, outdated. But here's the breakthrough code can be changed. The moment you notice the pattern, you begin to edit it. Gabor Mate reminds us that what we call personality is often just adaptation, survival behavior mistaken for identity. But once survival is no longer necessary, those scripts become cages, loops, repeating instructions that no longer serve. And in that realization, something liberates you are not your programming. You are the one who can rewrite it. This is where healing becomes something more than recovery. It becomes recoding. You don't just revisit the past. You reframe it. You don't just soothe the wound, you reassign its meaning. That moment of abandonment, maybe it becomes the seed of your independence. That time you failed publicly, maybe it becomes the moment you stopped needing to impress. The facts don't change, but the narrative does. And the narrative is the interface through which you experience this world. Carl Jung would say that transformation happens when you integrate what you once rejected, the shadow, the forgotten parts of yourself, the emotions you buried, the dreams you abandoned. These aren't flaws. They're fragments of original code. The parts of you that got overwritten by fear, by culture, by trauma, when you bring them back into the light, you don't just feel better, you reclaim authorship. So what does it mean to be the programmer? It means becoming aware of how you speak to yourself, how you frame what happens, how you assign value. It means realizing that your thoughts are not passive. They're active scripts shaping your perception in real time. And perception is reality, not because it changes the world outside, but because It determines how you experience it. And that experience is the only world you'll ever truly know. Think of every belief like a filter. If you believe people can't be trusted, you'll find evidence everywhere. If you believe life is inherently generous, you'll notice small graces others miss. This isn't delusion. It's selective focus. It's the power of attention, the original cursor blinking in the mind. You point it somewhere, and the simulation responds. Even science tells us this now. The placebo effect, neuroplasticity, cognitive reframing, these aren't metaphysical ideas. They're empirical observations of how thought changes biology, how belief alters behavior, how identity itself can be reshaped through repetition and care. You're not stuck. You're editable. And maybe the deepest reprogramming happens not in the mind, but in the heart, when you forgive, when you soften, when you choose compassion over control, not because it's easy, but because it rewrites something at the core. A new function, a new rule, a new reality unfolding from the inside out. The ego, the constructed self, is like the user interface. It helps you navigate the world. But behind it is the original code. The inner child, the dreamer, the one who remembers joy without condition, curiosity without fear. That part of you never forgets how to program. It knows that this life isn't fixed. It's fluid, a canvas, a simulation, yes, but a responsive one. You don't need to escape it. You just need to update it. This doesn't mean you control everything, but it means you influence how things unfold, how you show up, how you respond, how you shape the next moment. It means that even in grief, even in chaos, even in the glitch, you can bring clarity, not to the world, to your perception of it. And that shift changes everything. Here's the symbolic image, a keyboard glowing in the dark, but there are no fingers typing. The keys move on their own, slowly, thoughtfully, as if consciousness itself is writing not from a distance, but from within you. You're not just pressing the keys. You are the code being written and the writer at once. And here's the soft question to sit with now. If your beliefs are the architecture of your experience, what kind of world are you building one thought at a time? You followed every thread, pulled apart the seams, looked behind the curtain, questioned the rules, the patterns, the stories. You've wandered through glitches and echoes loops and awakenings. You've touched your own shadows. Remembered old dreams, softened toward strangers who once felt like noise in the system. And here you are on the edge of the question that started it all. Is this real? But something in you, quieter now, less desperate, no longer needs the answer. Because maybe the wrongness of the question was the whole illusion. Maybe what matters isn't whether this life is real. Maybe what matters is how you live it. It's easy to get lost in the metaphysics, to chase theories, build models, argue probabilities. Is it a dream, a simulation, a divine play, a hallucination shared by billions of minds? But none of those answers change the fact that when you hear a certain song, something inside you softens. That when someone says your name with care, you feel it like warmth behind your eyes. That when grief comes, it isn't theory, it's ache. That when love finds you, even for a moment, it changes everything. Simulated or not, these moments matter. You cry at films even though you know they're not real. You feel for fictional characters, carry their stories long after the credits roll. Why? Because something true passed through them, not literal, but real in another way. Emotionally real, symbolically real, soulfully real. And maybe this life, all of it, is that kind of film. Rendered in sensation, animated by perception, held together not by facts, but by meaning. And meaning doesn't require objective proof. It only asks to be felt, to be lived. That hug you gave when no one was watching. That apology you whispered to the night sky, that quiet choice to stay, to breathe, to try again, Those are not illusions. They are choices made at the edge of uncertainty, and that is where the most honest kind of living happens. The mind will always seek ground. It wants certainty, final answers, but the heart thrives in the in-between. It knows that truth can't be contained in a binary real or fake, awake or asleep, inside or outside. Truth moves, it pulses, it shows up in unlikely places, in paradox, in poetry, in the softness of a moment where nothing is solved but everything is seen. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And maybe that's what this whole simulation is for. Not to reveal the secret of the universe, but to bring you back to you. To peel away the layers, the scripts, the inherited code, to remind you of what it feels like to choose, to feel, to be. Even inside an illusion, especially inside an illusion that remembering matters. And so, what if this world isn't the base reality? So what if the stars are pixels and the forests are fractals and your thoughts are rendered on demand? The laughter still lifts you. The memories still shimmer. The pain still carves space for depth. And that's not failure. That's art. That's the magic of a system designed not to prove itself, but to touch you. If we are characters in a dream, then let us be conscious ones. Let us write with love. Let us walk with care. Let us treat even the mundane as sacred, not because it's empirically real, but because we are real within it. The world may be an interface, but what we bring to it, curiosity, courage, tenderness, that's not simulated, that's chosen. And maybe the most honest thing you can do in a world of uncertainty is stay. Stay awake even when it's easier to sleep. Stay soft even when it hurts. Stay curious even when answers elude you. Not for the sake of finding the truth, but for the sake of living as if you are it. Here's the symbolic image to close with a digital flower blooming in real soil. Its edges flicker, its colors shift, but it grows. It bends toward a light that might not exist, and still it blossoms, not because it knows, because it trusts. And the final soft question, if none of this can be proven, can you love it anyway? Maybe this was never about discovering whether the world is real. Maybe it was about discovering whether you are. You searched for the exit and found a mirror. You traced the code and found your own beliefs. You looked for the programmer and heard your own voice whispering back. You've touched the edge of illusion, the center of purpose, and the quiet rhythm of awareness. And through it all, one thing has remained: the pulse of presence, the truth that you are here, breathing, noticing, becoming. If this life is a simulation, it's not a cold prison. It's a soft unfolding, a canvas that responds to how you look at it, a dream that changes as you change. And maybe that's more beautiful than certainty, because it means your experience is not dictated, it's co-authored, not by a distant force, but by you. There will still be days when everything feels foggy again, when the loops return, when nothing makes sense. That's okay. That's part of the rhythm. Lucidity is not a permanent state. It's a practice, a quiet choice to come back to this moment and meet it with attention, with care, with openness. And when the glitches return, because they will smile at them, they are not warnings. They are invitations, small sacred cracks in the interface where the mystery peeks through. You don't need to fix them. You only need to feel them. This is the end of the script, but not the end of the dream. Drift gently now. Let the questions fade like morning mist. Let the answers remain soft like breath. End of script. Drift gently, and I'll meet you in the next thought.